In the summer of 1990, Canadian soldiers and members of the Mohawk Nation near Oka, Quebec engaged in a 78-day standoff over land rights. It was a historic encounter with ripples well beyond that time. But it did not ultimately resolve the land claim issues. Joining us now for more from Perth, Ontario, Gahunde Hornmiller, an associate professor at Carleton University School of Indigenous and Canadian Studies. And from Couchiching First Nation in Northwestern Ontario, Sarah Mainville, a former chief and partner at OKT Law. Welcome to you both. Gahunde, before we dive in, we should note the term Mohawk is widely known and used, but what do you call yourself?
We call ourselves the Ganyankahaga, which is our own traditional language to describe our origins in the Mohawk Valley, the land of the flint.
Why is it important to acknowledge that there's a difference?
Since in the last 30 years, we've seen a resurgence and a reinvigoration of our traditional language. So back in 1990, we used the term Mohawk ourselves to describe ourselves, but with the desire to bring back our traditional language, we've taken up the term once again and reclaimed it. So we now describe ourselves more widely as Ganyankahaga.
Just from what you said, it's, to take on someone else's description or someone else's language. Before we started taping, I said, throughout my schooling, I've never been offered, or classes, we've never had any classes that teach us Indigenous languages. But when you take somebody else's description of yourself, that must change how you view yourself.
Oh, of course. It speaks to how we were viewed at first contact and the years following, the centuries following, where a certain impression or a certain worldview was placed on us. We've seen the impacts of that through the residential school system. We've seen it, with opposition to our fighting for our lands and our rights in the courts, outside of the courts, on the land. It's an imposition of another worldview that has nothing to do with our own view, which is about our connection to the natural world. So the words we use to describe ourselves are about that. We don't have nouns in our language. We have verb. It's a verb-based language, which talks about our relationships to each other, to the natural world. So if anyone trying to understand our language or trying to learn our language, it would bring them a whole new perspective on the natural world and their connection to it.
Now, as we look over, it's been 30 years since the Oka crisis. We do have a map that shows the regions at the heart of the crisis. Could you please walk us through what we're seeing here?
Sure. We have in Gonosadage, which is near Oka, Quebec. You can see in the upper left side of the map, that's where women began peaceful protest. They had set up a fire in the pines when the community had gone as far as they could in terms of trying to fight the community of Oka, trying to expand their golf course. And so the women of the community had decided, okay, we've had enough. We're going to set up a peaceful protest and a fire. And it was out of that as when the police, the Sûreté de Quebec, were called in to remove the peaceful protesters that things began to escalate. And so we see out of that a 78-day standoff. It was the men of our communities that came and supported the women. It was men from other nations that came, Indigenous nations from across Canada, actually North America, that came and supported our women. And then also our community of Kahnawake blockaded the Mercier Bridge in support as well. So, and there was also protests across Canada and blocking of railroads and things like that.
Sarah, what do you remember thinking as you watched those events unfold 30 years ago?
Well, it was really timely for me in my own education because I had just gone to Lethbridge, Alberta. There was an innovative program there starting on Aboriginal self-government, which was the promise of Section 35, was self-government for Indigenous peoples. And to see this happening, and certainly talking about the women, like Ellen Gabriel just blew my mind when I first seen her, when I first heard her talk.
And she was the leader, right?
Resilience. Yeah, she was a spokesperson, I believe. And she continues to be a really excellent spokesperson for various Indigenous causes today. And she also continues to educate on this situation and why it's an important situation to resolve today, finally. But just the act of self-determination by deciding enough is enough. And what happened there was just so, I think News World was brand new at the time, so to see it 24/7, the conflict in real time, was just, I think, for me as a young Anishinaabe person, someone who wanted to be a lawyer, it was just, it definitely reinvigorated my resolve to try to lend my hand, but also that there's just something new here. No, you don't necessarily have to go to a government negotiation table, because those didn't seem to be working. They're in fact languishing, and there was new tools in the toolbox with the strong stand that these people had taken, and certainly supported by most Indigenous communities across Canada.
And Gahande, what was it like for you 30 years ago, seeing the events unfold? What do you remember?
Well, at that time I was 18. I had just finished high school. I think, seeing my mother there and my sisters there and realizing that this was something really important in terms of my Mohawk identity at the time, which I don't use anymore. I use Kanien'kehá:ka, as I mentioned. But for me, I think a lot of other people, a lot of other young Indigenous people at that time, it was an awakening point. And to watch this unfolding invigorated a sense of pride in one's identity, but really, it propelled me and others to go forward and examine, okay, what is that identity? What does it mean to be Mohawk? And so it really put me on a path towards learning, self-discovery, teaching, really critically examining the issues and trying to communicate and teach those to students and others.
We have one of the images that came out of the Oka crisis, probably one of the most famous pictures from there. When you see that picture, what does that image represent to both of you? Sarah, I'd like to start with you.
I think it shows the strength and the resilience of the Mohawk people, and it also shows sort of the determined project of Canada to continue to colonize us. I think that's why the term decolonization is so much more meaningful to Indigenous folks who are trying to transform our relationship in Canada and with Canadian society. Decolonization. So this is sort of the tipping point for me of colonization.
Gahande, when you see that image, what does it represent to you?
That image, I've come to, when I first saw it, to me it represented strength. It represented an aspiration. It represented power and what I was witnessing my family and my community do. But then over time, it's come to represent something very different. I had the opportunity to speak with Brad, the young man in the image, the warrior in the image, more recently. And he explained to me when I asked him, what does this image mean to you? He said, it's actually not an image about me. It's an image about colonization. It's about the imposition of an identity upon our people. And I thought about this some more, and I examined it within the context of my own culture, where we have a very different understanding about the role of our men and the responsibilities of our men. And we have a word that describes that, and it's called rodiskanragete, and it means to carry the burden of peace. And I think that, if I look back 30 years, is what the men were doing at that time, was upholding the peace, upholding a peaceful demonstration, upholding a peaceful movement to ensure that the land around the pines and in the pines and those pines themselves survived. So it's a very different understanding if we are to examine it further.
Well, earlier this month, a convoy commemorated the 30 years that have passed since the Oka crisis erupted. You can see the Mohawk flag being flown proudly out of that first vehicle. Gahande, what do you want people to know about that Mohawk flag?
Yes, well, in my master's degree,
Mhm.
my master's thesis actually was about that flag because I wanted to understand it further. I had been seeing it flown for the 10 years. I'd seen it flown at Oka. I'd seen it flown within the 10 years in different protest movements since that time. And so in the late 80s, I began to do the research for my work, my master's thesis, and I interviewed a number of people throughout Kahnawake, throughout Akwesasne, on what that flag meant and what its symbols mean. And also, I examined the work of a man, Louis Gardiner Hall, who is the designer of that flag. And it comes out of his own artwork and understanding of our philosophical underpinnings, which are rooted in the Gayanardik Goa, which is the great law of peace. And so, really, Gayanardik Goa means a way of peace. So, each one of those symbols in the flag speaks to different elements, different parts of that philosophy. And so if we are to look at that flag in today, and if we were to understand the Gayanardik Goa, we would see that it actually represents a peaceful way of life. It actually represents peace building and unity. And when during my research, it was very interesting. I went to Burnt Church, Eskenovich, among the Mi'kmaq, who had flown that flag in '96 during the Lobster War. And I went to them and I said, "This is who I am. This is where I come from. What does that flag mean to you?" And so they would tell me the story of their community, the story of their struggle. And then at the end of that, they would say, "Okay, now that and they would describe the flag within that context and the impression that 1990 had on them to stand up and fight oppression." And then at the end of that, they would ask me, what is this? Where does this flag come from? And what was the most incredible point was the incredible thing that came out of those interviews and understandings was that, so this flag represents unity and resistance. And those people at Eskenovich had described it as a flag of unity and resistance without even knowing where it came from. It represented that. So this flag is really amazing because it has the ability to carry that message, which is the same message that we understand that our great law, our Gayanardik Goa, is meant to go out in all directions. So when you look at the flag and you see the yellow starburst pattern, that's actually the directions in the Gayanardik Goa traveling out in all directions where people can follow its roots back and take shelter under the tree of the long leaves. And so that flag represents to me, through much thought and through much introspection, the Gayanardik Goa as a living entity.
Sarah, just to go back to what you were saying before, what Gahande just said, does that also speak to what you were saying about decolonizing, changing the narrative, and filling in the gaps where the context was missed the first time around?
I think that really is it resonates with me because I think that's really back to original intent on that nation to nation relationship was that we would learn how to do things better together.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these resistance is about unilateralism, really, and treating us all the same, where we have different agreements, different arrangements, different relationships as Indigenous peoples with Canada. I'm a Treaty 3 person. My relationship with Canada is quite different from the Haudenosaunee people because their orientation just to law itself is different from Anishinaabe orientation to law. So respecting that is really important. And so decolonization is learning that we're quite an eclectic group of people as Indigenous people, but if we work together, some of our own ways of doing and our ways of thinking will be helpful to Canada. our own rules, our own institutions, the way we do things. We've seen that in dispute resolution. We're seeing it a bit more in human rights discourse. That Indigenous law really resonates just to people as human beings, and certainly the wonderful sharing of teachings around the Haudenosaunee. Um, it just for me it resonates as well because we're all human beings, and that's really the project of nations, is trying to live in peace.
I have a few more pictures to show, and I just wanted to let everybody know that they are a bit upsetting. The first picture we're seeing here is an effigy of a Mohawk warrior, which was burned by area residents as they chanted Savage. The next picture we're going to look at is the rocks being hurled at a convoy of Mohawks. And in the cars, children were in the cars, and children ended up getting hurt. And I don't know if you can see, but you can see police. And some people have said that the police didn't do anything to help. Gahande, your mother and sisters were there. How did living through those events shape your family's life?
Well, my mother and my sisters weren't in the rock throwing incident. They were over in Kanesatake, in the treatment center with the other people. But our Indigenous people, we think a lot about and work towards enriching our community. We are a community of people first and foremost. And when I think about, the impact of those images, I see them now, and it still hurts. I can still sense out of it the danger that came, the trauma that came from our children experiencing those events. That I think about the trauma that my sisters experienced and my mother, and we've talked a lot over the years about the impact of 1990: personal impact, familial impact, community impact, nation impact. And what we've come to understand as a family is that we need to move ahead. And so we worked really hard to build from that event, to build and learn from those experiences and say, okay, we're going to make it different for our children and the coming faces, the 7 generations to come. And so that has been our largest response in the last 30 years, is we've gone on and established ourselves, gotten an education, we've had children. I'm a grandmother now, and I think about the impact of now, as I revisit this with you, I'm thinking about, well, what is it that I can take away from this and teach my grandchild? What is she going to learn? Because I think about this a lot as I teach in the classroom. A lot of the students coming in now have no understanding. They were not even born during 1990, but it is my responsibility as an educator to teach them and use it as a way to help them understand the history and relationship between Indigenous peoples and Canada.
I have a board here that I wanted to read. Earlier this month, Sean Carlton, an assistant professor in history and Native studies at the University of Manitoba, wrote an op-ed for the Globe and Mail titled, "Did Canada Learn Anything from the Oka Crisis?" Here's some of what he had to say. He writes, in the 30 years since the Oka crisis, there have been many government apologies and promises to improve Indigenous settler relations in Canada. These are important first steps, but they must be backed up by meaningful reconciliation, namely the return of land stolen during colonization. The future of Indigenous settler relations depends on Canada's ability to resolve land struggles, such as the one in Kanesatake, which has been going on for 300 years too long. Sarah, what are your thoughts on that take?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think that there has to be much more action rather than words. I think that, apologies have, I think that they don't resonate as much anymore because of the lack of action afterwards. So we have many, many volumes of reports and studies about how we can achieve a truer reconciliation. But I think at this point in time, our youth and a lot of our scholars and advocates, they're just land back. There's a hashtag in social media, land back. I mean, that's just underlying everything. If you're not willing to return the land, then let's stop pretending that a reconciliation is in our future. And let's talk about real and meaningful things and actions that will change the dynamics and relationships in a real way to allow First Nations to be self-sustainable,
What,
because we're languishing.
what would action look like for you?
I'm working on land claims now, and the imposition of unilateral principles and unilateral policies that restrict the return of land, the overemphasis on third party impacts and making sure that third parties are not impacted by land claims. It's just, I mean, that's not sensible. It's not going to achieve a just settlement with those types of restrictions in place, and also the Indian Act and the 19th century governance in Indian Act chief and councils. We need to restore the original jurisdiction that our governments once had and respect those governments. And that's really coming to play. And now you see more and more of those types of disputes going to court, and courts are now recognizing the need to recognize that these First Nations have governments that have true authority to be self-determining.
And Gahande, what did you think of those comments made by Sean Carlton?
I think they outline a basis to the problem. I think that land back is only the foundation on which we can build. Our populations are one of the fastest growing populations. The majority of our populations are under the age of 25. And if we think about the size of our communities, the size of the reservations, the land granted to us, they won't hold us. They won't sustain us. And so we have, we need to think about how can we, what does getting land back serve? It serves then as a basis for regeneration. It serves as a basis for building upon and increasing the capacity of our communities to look after ourselves. And I think Sarah has an important point where she talks about, the importance of recognizing our own traditional governance, our own governance systems that are still very much alive. They're still very much, but not recognized by the Canadian state. And more, we see that with Wet'suwet'en, the conflict between the traditional system and the elected system in that dispute, and the urgency and the need for Canada and people of Canada to recognize that we have our own systems that speak to they look after community. They're based on a very different way of thinking. They're based on this, thinking about community, putting community needs first, putting relationships with the natural world first. Our original instructions tell us we are here to look after the earth. And so any kind of events that you see coming out since 1990 are all about that. They're about enacting our original instructions, enacting our sovereignty to determine the future of our communities, to caretake our communities, to look after our children and the future generations. And I have to say, this is not just about our own people. When we are caretaking the earth, we are thinking about your 7 generations, the children that are coming from you. And so this is not just about us. We are thinking about everybody because we are all in this together. And we have to start thinking about that and teaching and speaking with one another.
Sarah, I wanted to jump off of what Gahande was saying. How much of a role do divisions between traditional and elected leadership play in land disputes?
Well, I think that the Indian Act governments generally are dealing with the relationship with Canada directly, the funding arrangements and the Indian Act powers for First Nation governments. For the most part, I think that's generally what happens with those communities that have fostered and revitalized traditional governance alongside of these. They retain the authority over over the land and over the relationship with other nations, that diplomatic relationships, and of course land governance and traditional territories. So, to Canada needs to know more of this and have a more sophisticated understanding of what they've done historically with these First Nations, like the Haudenosaunee Confederacy with Grand Council Treaty 3. They displaced this government that they made a treaty with in Treaty 3. So to understanding their own history is really important. But some other communities too that I work with have merged these authorities into one. So the Chief and Council have Anishinaabe traditional governance as well. They call their chief Ogama. Ogama Khan is the Chief and Council. So they've taken on both of those important roles and authorities.
Gahande and Sarah, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
Nice to meet you, Sarah.
All right. Take care.
Nice to meet you as well. Bye.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.